We are now about to turn to Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis, but first we'll read the last few lines on Chav Zayin Amud Aleph, the Mishnah. Shofar shenizna. The shofar has a crack in it. Vidivko, and he glues it up with devek pasul. It's still considered like two shofars. Once it's split, then even though you attach the two halves, it's like two different shofars. And the Torah says, shofar echad amar Achmana v'lo shnei shofars. Divek shivrei shofars, pasul. If he has smaller segments of broken pieces of a shofar and he puts them all together, and through devek, he makes them into one shofar, it looks like one shofar, even that case is pasul, but for a different reason. Not because it looks like two shofars. He did a very good job putting it together. You know, people who play with, those models like, ships. You ever see them? They're made of different pieces, but they look like one ship. But rather, ein shem shofar olah. It doesn't have a shem shofar, even though he was able to be madbik the various shivrei shofars together, and he made it look like one shofar, but it's still possible. It doesn't have a shem shofar. And now we turn to Daf Chav Zayin Amud Beis. Nikev usasamo. He had a hole in the shofar. And you can imagine that the sound of the shofar is not going to be the real, original, genuine sound of a shofar. So what did he do? Susmo. He put a plug inside of it to plug it up. Could be that he would be Yotze. Now the question is, what is the quality of the sound that he hears? Like we discussed in the case of B'toch HaBor. Im ma'akev es hatkiya, if, despite the fact that he plugged up the hole, it still is not the same as the original kol shofar pasul. And that's called nishtana kamus shkol shofar. Mikmo Im lav, if the kol shofar is identical to what it was before the nekev, kosher. Atokel tocha bor tocha dus tocha pitos. Im kol shofar shama yotzam kol avar shama lo yotzam. V'chein mishay over me'achorei beis hakneses. He walks past the shul on Rosh Hashana. Oshay beis samach beis hakneses, where he's standing at his porch, which is directly outside of a beis hakneses. V'shama kol shofar, or the same thing would apply in shama kol Megillah. In kivein libo yotza. If he had kavana to be yotze, then he fulfills his mitzvah. In lav, if he didn't have kavana, lo yotza. And the Mishnah explains, afal picha zeh shama v'zeh shama, but zeh kivein libo, v'zeh lo kivein libo. Even if, let's say, the one who blows the shofar would have kavana, or the opposite, the one who hears the shofar, no, that's not enough. We need that both the tokea and the shomea should both have kavanah. Now, this Mishnah about kavanah in kiva and libo should not be confused with a famous sugi that's going to come up later on. That's tomorrow's daf for Shabbos, and that is the sugya of mitzvah strichas kavanah. The Gemara there comes to the conclusion that you could be yotzei the mitzvah of shofar even without kavanah. But that Mishnah is talking about a case where you blow the shofar. In a case where someone else is blowing the shofar, and you have to be mitzaref to his blowing, then you need the kavanah of the tokea plus the tokea of that of the shomer. We learned in a brayso Tana Rabbanan Aroch v'kitzro kosher. You can take a longer shofar and cut off part of it, and as long as you have the shear of shofar, which we'll discuss later on, it could be held in a fist and it pushes out on this side and that side. You yotze. Gardo, if he starts peeling off layers from the shofar, then mido al gildo, he got to the point where it's a very thin shofar, kosher, it doesn't matter. Dispose of, then we have to discuss where he put the zov. If it's in the place where he puts his mouth on the shofar, is then possible. Now, according to the Ramban, Mokom Anochas Piv, Hainu Ovi HaShofar Berosho Atzar, Shebo HaTokeh Meniches Piv. V'shalo b'mokom Anochas Piv, Hainu Chelko HaChitzon Shel HaShofar. And I think the Ramban is learning that there's a chatzitza problem that separates his mouth from the shofar if he puts the zav inside the shofar. Tzipo zav mi bifnim posel. Mi bachutz, okay. So now the question that I have to ask you, isn't there a certain element of repetition in this brisa? Because we just finished saying that b'mokom anochas piv, posel. And we identified that, based on the Ramban, as a tzipui of zav inside the shofar. So why does the brisa now add tzipo zav mi bifnim posel? That would seem to be a repetition of what we just had before. And in the Rishonim, like the Ritva, they say that the reason why it's possible in this last case of Tzipo Zavi Bifnim is because she'ein kan kol shel shofar ela kol shel zav. So we're not dealing with a chatzitza psul. We're dealing with the fact that he's hearing a kol that bounces off the gold and not from the shofar. So atam shabraisa koteves tzipo zav shemechadeshes tzipo shelo b'mokom anochas piv eino posel mishum chatzitza. Do you follow what's going on here? If his lips will not be in direct contact with the shofar, that's the ratio of this price. So that's the chatzitza issue. But you can have a situation where the blowing, since the tzipo is inside the shofar, even though it's not a chatzitza, it's on a different part of the shofar, not the part that touches his lips, but nevertheless he's hearing the kol of zav. Mibachutz. But now he covers the shofar with a layer of gold on the outside. Im nishtana kolo, again, similar to what we had by Nikev Vesosmo, and well, very similar to the case of Tokeh B'Toch Bar, he hears the shofar kamochahu, as it were, the sound is identical to that before he tzipo, before he covered it with gold, is then kosher. But if nishtana kolo, if as a result of the fact that he put the layer of gold on the outside, somehow in a thin shofar with a layer of gold on the outside, it's going to affect the kol shofar, then possible. Nikev usesamo, and this we saw already in our Mishnah, im Yaakov es hatkia posel v'im lav kosher. Now Nasan shofar b'toch shofar, puts a smaller shofar inside a larger shofar, and he's blowing in the smaller shofar. Im kol pnimi shama. Let's say, for example, the smallest shofar, although it's smaller in height, it's longer than the upper shofar, so that when he blows, the sound can come out of the inner shofar that he's blowing, even though it's smaller, but nevertheless it is aruch yosef mishofar chitzon. Is yatsa the kol chitzon shama. If on the other hand he heard the outer shofar, so the kol is coming exclusively from the outer shofar, lo yatsa. And here we have a loch of hefsek here, which means that the inner shofar, which is made of like shofar, no, it's got mechitzo, so to speak, they form a hefsek in the tekiah, because he's listening to the kol chitzon, but the shofar pnimi is a mafsik between the production of the sound and the sound itself. Ton Rabbanan Gerdo, if he starts peeling off the shofar, bein mi bifnim, bein mi bachutz kosher, it matters not whether he peels the inside of the shofar or the outside, it's always kosher. Gerdo v'mino al gildo, even if he whittles it down to a very thin krum dak, kosher. Iniach shofar b'toch shofar. Again, in this next brayso, we have a repetition of what we saw in the previous brayso. Im kol pnimi shama yatsa, im kol chitzon shama lo yatsa. My father, Zichron Livracha, has a whole drasha on this line in the Gemara, in his Sefer, which is called, I actually have it here on the desk. It's called the Dovei Meisharim. Can you see it? Yeah? And he has a drasha called Kol Pnimi. And he dashens that Kol Pnimi is really the pnimius of the shofar. It's a very, very outstanding drasha, but anyway, let me know if you want to read it. Okay. So im kol pnimi shama yatsa, fine. Afacho. Now here's an interesting case. I don't know how you pull this off, but apparently you can make a shofar very flexible, very soft and malleable. Hafacho v'takabo lo yatsa. Imagine he turns the shofar upside down, inside out and upside down. The inside becomes the outside becomes the inside. Is lo yatsa. He's not only limiting the psul in a case where he really turns it inside out, like a ketones, like a beged. Imagine you wear your shirt inside out. But even in the case of shehirchiv es hakotzar v'kitzer es harachav, right? There are two sides to its shofar. One is called a kotzer. That's the smaller one. That's usually where he puts it to his mouth. And then there's the rachav, the wider side at the other end of the shofar. And what he's able to do was, he was able to extend the shofar on the side of the shofar that's tsar, that's narrow, that goes against his mouth. He widened it. And the wider side of the shofar, he was able to collapse it, so to speak, to reduce its size. And that, says Rav Papa, is what the Bryce has in mind by afacha. Afacha means that the tsar side now became rachav, and the rachav side became tsar. And my timer, why should that pass on the shofar? I mean, until now we've said that you can peel off parts of the shofar, you can cut off parts of the shofar. What's the problem here? It was marchiv part and makatza the other part. Kidder of Masna, the Omer of Masna, we derive from a pasuk in Vayikra Chaf Hey with regard to the shofar of Yom Kippurim of Shnasa Yovel, The pasuk says, "Va'avarta shofar trua v'chodesh hashvi," and from the word "va'avarta" we derive the conclusion derech havaraso be'inon, the way it's carried on the head of the animal. B'tzorech hashofar shia kederech sha'ayil, just like it's worn on the head of the ayil, b'rosho b'yodo chai, while it's alive, and the derech of gedilas hashofar on top of the head of the animal is tchila gadel chelik tsar, and then it widens towards the end. If he switches that around, then it's not gedilaso. It's not called havarasa, derech havaraso, the way the gedilas shofar was. And in my mind, this is very reminiscent of what we learned in Masechet Sukkah about turning the Daled Minim upside down. It's not kederech gedilasa. Dibek shivrei shofros. Apostle, the Mishnah says that if he attaches broken pieces, it's apostle. If it's nike v'sosmo, then it depends on whether it's ma'akev esatchir. Tan Rabbanon hosif olav kol shehu. If he adds a piece that's not part of the natural shofar and he attaches it to the shofar, is bein v'mino, bein shelo b'mino, whether he added a piece from another shofar or he took a piece of, I don't know, metal or glass or whatever it might be, and he adds it, that's shelo b'mino, also. Nike v'sesamo is bein b'mino, bein shelo b'mino pasul. Okay, this is a case of ma'akev es atkia, and it doesn't matter whether the stima was from a shofar piece or from something else, which is shelo b'mino. As long as it changes the nature of the sound of the shofar, it's ma'akev es atkia, it's possible. Rabbi Yonasan Omer, no, b'mino kosher, shelo b'mino possible. According to Rabbi Yonasan, if he did the stima on the neck of the shofar with mino, then that means it's part of the shofar. And assuming it's not ma'akev the tkiya, then it's kosher. Dafka shelo b'mino is possible. So now Rabbi Yochanan is going to try to explain Rabbi Yonasan. B'mino kosher, Rabbi Yochanan v'uchenitchtaya rubo. Rabbi Yonasan would only be machshir the shofar if most of the shofar is still intact. The original shofar, the neck of the shofar, did not create a hole that extended throughout most of the shofar. And now sasmo b'mino kosher. So Gemara says Michlal, we can see from Yochanan's statement, it's shelo b'mino, if he was so same shelo b'mino, afal pi shenishtaya rubo, even though you have most of it, because again, if he didn't have most of the shofar in its original form, then it's possible no matter mino or eno mino. And therefore we must be talking about a case of nishtaya rubo. And nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan is saying, since he would sotzim it shelo b'mino, it's possible. And that's how Rabbi Yochanan understood the statement of Rabbi Yonasan of sosmo b'mino kosher, that we're talking about nishtaya rubo. Most of the shofar is still intact. And therefore, Rabbi Yonasan says that stomo shelo b'mino is possible, he means even though it's nishtaya rubo. And even in this case, and in this scenario, it's possible. Because he was so same shelo b'mino. That's the first Lishna and the tradition that we have in Rabbi Yochanan. Now we have a different tradition. Ika demasni le'aseifa. Some have the words of Rabbi Yochanan. It's coming to qualify Rabbi Yonasan in the Seifa of shelo b'mino possible. And on that, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, v'hu shenifchas rubo. If the nekev was in rov hashofar, then if he was so same shelo b'mino, it's possible. Michlal, the Gemara's medayik from Rabbi Yochanan, that the b'mino If he was Sosim Bimino, then Afal Pisha Nifchas Rubo Kosher. So we have a fundamental machlokus, an issue here between the two Lashonos, Lishna Kama Rabbi Yochanan, Lishna Basa Rabbi Yochanan, regarding the situation of Nifchas Rubo, that this Nekev, which he fills in with a stima, it's like a dentist, filling in a hole in your tooth. It was either Bimino or Shalom Bimino, but it was Nifchas Rubo, which means that if it was Shalom Bimino, you have two strikes against you. It's Nifchas Rubo, and it's a stima of Shalom Bimino, it's possible. But if the Nifchas Rubo and the stima was Bimino, then it's kosher. That's according to Lishna Basra of Rabbi Yochanan. The Brisa says, Tzipo zov mi b'fnim pasul, mi b'chutz, im nishtane kolo michvot shahoya pasul, mi im lav kosher. Nistak li orko pasul, but l'rochbo, second, Baruchbo. He says here, Baruchbo is the heke for the shofar. Just give me 1 second here. He says if it was split along its width, I'm not sure if that's what the Masifta means here. I'm just going to take a shot at this, and with limited liability, I think what he means by split along its width is from top to bottom, meaning the shofar goes in this direction, that's called the length, and then the width would be from top to bottom. We just see as a footnote here, does that add anything? He says along the majority of its circumference. If less than half of the circumference is split, the shofar is valid. Im nishtayr bo shir tkiya, kosher. Im lav, posel. So what's a shir tkiya? He says that from the crack to the mouthpiece of the shofar's narrow end, so we're halfway there. He says, "In the shtarbo shir tkiya kosher milav possible kama shir tkiya." So, what is the measure that we require? What's the shir of a tkiya? Pirei Sham and Shimon Gamliel. What is the shir tkiya? Kadesh yachazenu biyado v'yira lekan lekan. So he holds on to it with his fist, and part of the shofar protrudes on the two sides of his fist. And apparently, based on a Gemara in Nida, that's equivalent to a tefach. So it's not like everybody's fist is subjective. It's a shear of a tefach. And we have to determine the size of the area from the crack to the mouthpiece of the shofar. Is it a tefach, and then it's possible, or it's less than a tefach and it's kosher? Hoya kolo dak, o ove o tzoror kosher, lefisha kol hakolos ksherim b'shofar. So we don't care about the quality of the nature of the sound of the shofar. It might be a thin sound, it might be a thick sound, it might be a rough sound. In all these cases, all sounds are kosher. The Chachamim sent a question to the father of Shmuel, Kidacho. He took a drill and he drilled a hole in the shofar, v'takabo. Yatza. I don't know if you read a yatza with a question or yatza with an exclamation mark. So the Gemara says, Pshita, certainly I would assume he was Yotze. Kulu nami miktach kadachulu. I mean, in order to get a hole in a shofar, you have to drill a hole in a shofar. Otherwise, it's completely in its natural state attached to the head of the animal. There's no halal to blow a sound. Omar Ravashi shekidacho bi zachruso. He made a nekev in the zachrus of the shofar. What does that mean? He didn't take out the etzem that's inside the shofar. He didn't hollow out the enamel, so to speak, of the shofar, but rather he created a nekev inside the zachrus. But he left the shofar. Mal detem, I might think min b'mino chotzeitz, meaning the zachrus, which is mibin shofar, chotzetzes, bein kol hatkil shofar, and therefore the tokeh is not yotze. Kamash malon, the chachamim teach us by sending this message to Avud Shmuel that that's not so. If it's min b'mino, then eino chotzeitz, and a tokeh bo yotze yidei chovos. He says the following: all shofars must be punctured at the narrow edge before they can be blown. But the ruling here that they sent to Avud Shmuel involves the case where he bored into the bony inside of the horn rather than removing it. He says that there's a bony protrusion from the animal's head around which the horn grows. So the horn surrounds this bony protrusion. Normally, after the total appendage is detached, the bone is removed, and the hollow shell remains a shofar. In this case, however, he bored through the bone from end to end, rather than remove it. So he left the bone inside the shofar. The entire shofar now is lined, I guess he means on the inside, with bony material. And he didn't remove that bony material. Now, when he blows this shofar, what sound are you hearing? Are you hearing a sound from the bone or from the shofar, meaning the horn? So you would have said that min b'mino chotzeitz, since the bone is a natural part of the horn, it's called min b'mino, and it now has a chatzitza. You cannot be yotze yedei chovasa, because you have this bony material that lines the inner surface of the shofar, And min b'mino in a botel, so it has its own status, its own chashivus, and the sound is now issued from the bone rather than the horn. Mashmalon, but rather he teaches us that the bone and the horn are composed of similar materials. They grew together, two of them as one, and blowing through the horn is tantamount to blowing through the bone is tantamount to blowing through the horn. Into a pit, into a cistern. If he heard the sound of the shofar and not its echo, he has fulfilled his obligation. Omer Rav Huna, lo shanu el yodla osam sha'omdim al sfas habar, aval osam ha'omdim babar yatsu. We don't have to be concerned with those who are inside the bar. I don't know if you've ever been to Theresienstadt to see, I mean, that's a place where Jews were killed by the tens of thousands daily. But anyway, they built an underground shul, which now you could actually see it. It was beautifully decorated, very small shul that was, somehow they hid it from the Nazis. And I was always thinking, how did they blow the shofar inside that shul? But the answer is that whoever was inside the shul could hear the shofar. And there's no problem of kol avara if you're inside where the shofar is being blown. Tanya nami hochi atokel tochabar tochadus yotza. Vatnan lo yotza. La shmamino kiderav huna. Shmamino means that li osana omdiba bar yotza. Osam sha'omdim chutz bar. They're hearing the echo, and they are not yotze. Ika derami le mirmei. There are those who raise a stira between the Mishnah and the Brisa. The Brisa says that if you blow inside a pit, you are yotze. And how do we reconcile this stira? Rav Huna lo kasher. There's no contradiction. Those who are outside the bar, and they're going to hear the shofar's echo, or they might hear the shofar's echo. As far as those who are inside the bar, they are yotze. Amar Rabba, and here we're up to Daf Chav Ches. Shama mixas tkiya b'bar, who mixas tkiya al sfas bar yotza. It means that Rabba is taking us back to the question of mixas tkiya. So he heard mixas tkiya b'bar, which is kosher. So the beginning of the tkiya, he heard kedasu kedin, but then he lifted his head outside the bar and he heard the rest of the tkiya, the second half of the tkiya outside the bar. He's not yotze. So why is he yotze in this case? Because he heard the first half of the tkiya inside the bar. And a similar case, mixas tkiya kodem shi'al yashachar, mixas tkiya liachar shi'al yashachar. Amud Shachar Yotza. He heard the second half of the tkiya during the daytime, and he's yotze. So it means if you take this statement of Rabbah in its totality, all you need is mixas tkiya. Which mixas tkiya? It doesn't matter. In the case of bar, it's the second half of the tkiya. No. Sorry. In the case of the bar, it's the first half of the tkiya. Sorry. In the case of Kodem al Muda Shachar, it's the second half after Amud Shachar. And now we're going to have a problem trying to defend Rabbah against a whole slew of objections that try to prove that mixas tkiya is not enough. So this is where we're going to stop for today. Mr. Shemal, tape Daf Chav Ches and put it on YouTube, put it on YU Torah. Take this opportunity to thank you and wish you a Shabbat Shalom. And thanks for being flexible about the time.